Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us for this show. Faith with Reasons, show number 459 for this almost end of August, almost the last day. It's August the 30th. Of course, if you're listening to this on the Saturday replay, my date is wrong.
It won't be August 30th.
Just so you know, yeah. Yeah. But great to have you along with us again this week. And my name is Ron Finn. Shayne Stanfield in studio as well. How you doing, Shayne?
I'm doing real well. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Now, last week I was not able to do the show, and our producer, Tim Bulware, sat in, and I caught the last about 15 minutes of the show because I was on the road, and it sounded great. Sounded like you had a great show with Father Eric Culler last week.
We had a really good time. It was a great interview.
Good. Sounded like Tim was having fun with it too.
Well, I'm glad he was sitting in your seat because I told him I don't push the buttons real well. So
you don't do buttons and you don't do faders.
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. Throw your fastball in life. That's all you need to do, Shayne. Very good. We are real excited to have Teresa Mull on the program this week. She has got a great book out, and talk about timely. Now, Teresa's been writing, and it's really been all over. You may have heard, read some of her writings, or maybe heard from her on other topics as well. But she has written a book called Woke Proof Your Life, a handbook of escaping modern political madness and shielding yourself and your family by living a more self-sufficient, fulfilling life. So I can't wait to dig into this book and talk about the perfect time to have that, because we're surrounded.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
Surrounded.
Yeah, we're in deep.
Man, when you talk about all of the attacks from the culture, really, all around us. So it's very interesting. But Teresa was blessed to grow up in her ancestral home in the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania. Beautiful country. She received a degree in comparative literature from the University of Dallas and interned for Laura Ingraham at the American Spectator magazine in Washington, D.C. Now, Teresa traded the fast-paced lifestyle of our nation's capital for the mountains of Idaho before returning to her roots and her coal mining hometown, all while continuing to grow her career in conservative journalism. Teresa's writings have appeared in the New York Times, Baltimore Sun, Miami Herald, New York Post, Fairbanks Daily News Miner, American Conservative, and many other publications. I was just reading a few things posted on Alatea, as a matter of fact, by Teresa. She's currently an assistant editor of The Spectator World, a policy advisor for education at the Heartland Institute, and a part-time editor of the Phillipsburg Journal, where, by the way, her beloved terrier, Pitkin, has a weekly advice column. We might have to arrange to have Pitkin on the show and talk about that. That would be interesting. Now, in her free time, Teresa enjoys making the most of rural life by trap shooting at her favorite sportsman's club.
Nice.
Taking drives on the country, embracing eclectic adventures, helping to plan events for the local historical society, and befriending new and colorful characters who make her life rich and interesting. So I guess my first question to Teresa Mull is, do you get any time to sleep?
Not as much as I would like, but from time to time I'll snooze in on a Saturday or something. You know, you got to have energy to do all that fun stuff.
Boy, that's for sure. That takes a lot of energy, too.
That's what coffee's for also.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to talk about this book. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here.
I'd like to know how you got started in trap shooting. I know it's totally off topic, but I'm curious.
No, it is a tenet of woke-proofing your life is actually to pick up hobbies and pastimes and return to clubs and things, so that's perfect intro. I grew up in a very gun-friendly place. It's just kind of part of our culture in PA. I think we have the most number of NRA members other than Texas.
Wow.
So guns are just kind of a part of our there. Yeah, and so I grew up around them, and I always liked shotguns. I thought they were fun. They're beautiful. The woodwork and the engraving on some of them. So I was always attracted to them. And then, my local sportsman's club has a Tuesday night league. And I went and tried it, and it was really satisfying. If you've ever shot a clay pigeon out of the air, there's nothing like it, and it never gets old. Every time I break one, it's thrilling. So I kind of got hooked, and there's really great people who belong to the Sportsman's Club, very helpful, friendly, awesome, old school people. So I made a lot of friends, and I just kept doing it, and it's great.
Boy, what fun. That sounds like a blast. And you get to do that every Tuesday, huh?
Yes. Yep. Tuesday Night Trap League. It's something I look forward to. It's like stepping back in time, and it also helps that there's not really great cell phone coverage there or internet or anything like that, so it really does feel like you're kind of stepping back a few years.
Nice.
It's almost like a retreat.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So your shot people that do trap shooting, your shotguns are more elaborate than usual. Isn't that correct?
Mine is it's a Remington, and it's kind of a beginner's. It's actually kind of designed for women and children, so it's a little bit shorter. And for the reach, my arms aren't as long as obviously a man's would be. So yeah, I have kind of a basic model, but it does only shoot one shell, which is, most shotguns shoot at least two, an over-under or side-by-side has two barrels, so that you would shoot two. But yeah, mine only shoots one. It's designed specifically for trap. So
very neat. Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And before we get into the book, too, I've got to ask you, it must have been great fun to intern with Laura Ingraham. I had the pleasure of meeting her once when I was working in commercial radio. We had an AM talk station, and we carried her show, and she came to the area and actually did the show from the studio adjoining mine. So I got a chance to meet her and chat with her a little bit. What a nice woman.
She is, yeah. She's a strong Catholic also, and very, talk about energy and not sleeping. She's one of those people who I think they're blessed with extra superpowers or something, because she's just always high energy, always on the ball, and very impressive person. It was pretty neat to be around that kind of high caliber human, I would say.
Yeah, and she's always on topic, that's for sure. So yeah, one of our favorite people. This book, Woke Proof Your Life, which is available now from Sophia Institute Press. You can, of course, order it at your favorite Catholic bookstore. It might be on the shelf already, or you might have to order it, but you can definitely check out Sophia Institute's Facebook and Twitter feeds and get this as well. So in the book, you're bringing clarity to this madness of this cancel culture that we seem to be immersed in, the wokeism that pervades almost every area. And sometimes we feel like this silent majority, and you can't, every step you make is a false move. So it's like they want us to walk on eggshells or something. But Woke Proof Your Life is really a handbook, and it's really designed to help us kind of navigate through this. So first of all, I congratulate you on the work. What made you come to this topic and address it in this handbook?
There were a few things that inspired me. I would say that I do feel like one of the members of the canceled majority. I just look at the world now and society and culture and how angry everybody seems from both sides. It just seems like we're really combating each other in the socio-political realm, and it seems like life was just more peaceful and pleasant, even, certainly when I was growing up in my childhood, and even just like 3 years ago, I would say pre-COVID, it seemed a lot less stressful and a lot fewer causes. It seems like every time you turn around, you go to buy something, use a product or service that you've grown to love and relied on in America for decades, that you're funding some sort of, radical agenda that is opposed oftentimes to your traditional values and belief system. So I wanted to diagnose how we got this way, how our society has kind of turned against one another, and how we're all expected to make statements now, and how we get back to that more civil, peaceful, kind of agree to disagree on some issues kind of mentality. So I was frustrated and fed up with the world, and rather than just, be mad about it or write ranting articles, I wanted to provide a solution for other people who felt the same way I did. And I have found that kind of life that I was seeking and that I missed in my small hometown that I moved back to. And so I thought, if I kind of have a woke-proof existence here, how do I help other people who live elsewhere adopt such a lifestyle? So those are my inspirations, and I hope that I succeed for people.
I'm glad you followed your heart on that, because this is definitely something we all need, because you got to wonder what happened to civility. We used to be able to have conversations even with our neighbors and even those we attend church with that didn't lead into an argument. But you're right. There just seems like there's so much angst out there, and it's almost like a lot of us have turned into bullies here, and that's kind of scary because, I mean, it's one thing to be bombarded with usually paid activists that are forcing things down our throats, but it's another thing to talk about the cultural, I guess, indoctrination that we're getting, and in some cases adopting rather strongly. So it's kind of a disturbing time right now. But whatever happened to civility?
That's a good question. I think that I put a lot of blame in the book on the rise of social media and our overuse of screen time in general, because that is a really easy way that people can be bullies without very many repercussions. You can call someone nasty names. You can accuse them of things that you would never do if you were talking to this person in real life.
So true.
It's also an easy way to bring woke rhetoric and propaganda into so many millions, billions of people's lives, because, pretty much everyone has a cell phone, a TV, all these things. We're constantly being bombarded by media, and most of the media is owned by radical, woke progressives who are pushing this stuff. And then if you disagree with it, or you just have an alternate opinion and you want to speak out, you'll be canceled or censored. So I think our rise of the cell phones and omnipresent media, everywhere you turn there's a TV or something. I think that has a lot to do with it, and taking civility away from our interactions with one another, because you don't really have to be polite whenever you're just talking at people on the internet.
So how do you think we got here? I know I've heard many different theories on how this, where this push is coming from. It certainly seems organized, because it's in everything. And of course, we're reading now that we have even government funding, or organizations that are closely tied to the government have been paying the AP. I think there was a news story I read this morning in Catholic Loop. That was rather disturbing, because this wokeism, this, I think climate change, I think is one aspect of it. They were paying writers to focus on this anti-racism and climate change, as far as stories are concerned. So is that a safe is that a reason, or do you have another theory?
Well, wokeness, there's a lot being made of the definition of wokeness. The left likes to say, you can't even define what it is. And I argue in the book that that's on purpose, because it's a smokescreen for a lot of sinister goals. So, but in its essence, wokeness and all progressive liberalism, radicalism is a form of evil. So, evil has been around for forever. It will be around until the end of time. We're in a fallen world. So just keeping in mind that it is work of the devil, and that he is the father of lies, it kind of puts things in perspective. It's like, oh, okay, well, wokeness has some updated terminology. They have some new phrases: diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, the LGBTIA plus keeps evolving. So it can be confusing to people, and it can kind of be shocking. Where did this come from? It kind of seems like it came out of the blue, and it seems to be so aggressive. But really, if you analyze what they're trying to accomplish and how they operate, it's really nothing new. So it has been around for a long time, and it's been percolating. Again, I would point to the seemingly sudden rise of wokeness in particular, and the term wokeness, and this renewed energy, I guess you would say, behind the movement. I trace it kind of back to COVID again, because we weren't talking about what is a woman before COVID. We weren't talking about whether a man can give birth or, the transgender movement certainly was not as prominent before that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we were locked down, we were alienated from one another, we were isolated, and it's really easy to pit people against each other whenever nobody's hanging
targets.
out. Right,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and there was all that fear going on also. There was so much uncertainty with COVID. How serious is it? Can I go outside? Do I need to wear a mask? All these things. So it was really the perfect stage for wokeness to take hold, and you also think about how it pitted people against one another, like, are you vaccinated or unvaccinated? It almost became like a form of religion or something.
A cult,
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever gotten over that. Now they say that COVID's coming back and it's going to start all over again, just as we were starting to be normal and to hang out again and go to restaurants and all those things, they're going to do it again, stir us up. So, there's several things that go into the rise of wokeness, but I think also, again, you look at COVID, we were all stuck at home, and there was I cite this statistic in the book or a study that says how excessive screen time and screen addiction is actually have labeled it an unseen symptom of the pandemic. So a lot of people actually became addicted to their screens during that time, and it's not something that we hear a lot about. But you think about what's on your screen and all the poisonous stuff and the effects of social media is a rise in anxiety and depression and all of these mental illnesses. And whenever people feel bad about themselves, whenever they're miserable, they seek validation, they seek belonging, understanding, all the things that our hearts and souls crave. People are looking for that because there's an absence of God. As we lose our faith more and more, people feel purposeless and alone, and they're looking for meaning in their lives. And then the woke sweep in and say, I have the answer, if you have some weird pronouns, then you'll be cool. Or if you, mutilate yourself and take some hormones, then you'll fit in and you'll be popular and liked. And I think a lot of people are taken in by that, but they're realizing that it's not working, and that's why our misery levels continue to rise as wokeness rises also.
Absolutely. That's why we've seen such an increase in mental illness and issues involving the emotional state and so forth. We're talking with Teresa Mull on Faith with Reasons, author of Woke Proof Your Life. This is a wonderful handbook, and really you get into so many great topics in this book that are really illustrative, and they really kind of help educate us. And you actually define woke, the actual definition of woke. And can you kind of get into that a little bit? Because this may take some people by surprise.
Certainly, yeah. I define it as a socio-political ideology characterized by the manipulation of noble goals by radical left-wing zealots for the control and destruction of society. So, again, woke is really, and so are so many of the tenets of the woke movement. I call them weapons, but things like climate change, for instance, so you mentioned earlier, you think about how vague that is and how much that term has changed. Again, wokeness being nothing new. First, we actually, several years ago, if you remember, it was global cooling that we were worried about.
Oh, yeah.
Then we were worried about global warming.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was weird weather was a thing for a while, and now they've just settled on climate change because that can mean anything. You can blame any sort of just weather on climate change. So you have a warm day, oh, that's climate change. Cool day, oh, that's weird. It must be climate change. So it's kind of a catch-all. So that's super vague. Diversity, equity, inclusion, these are all good, noble things in and of themselves. But then whenever you look at how they go about accomplishing quote unquote diversity and equity, it's not a noble thing. They're pitting people against each other, again, dividing people to carry it out. So that's my definition. But I also, to simplify it, I just tell people it's a form of evil, and it's pretty much political correctness on steroids. We had affirmative action, but now we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's just kind of the a more extreme, different kind of vague terminology that they're using to kind of cover their tracks, so to speak. As people figured out that affirmative action was bad, now they're saying, oh, it's not that, it's diversity, equity, inclusion, it's something different. It's really not, though.
And you're certainly not far off base by labeling it as evil, because it certainly has roots in neo-Marxism. I mean, this is something that's crept into our education system for decades. They've slowly been working this in. A lot of this, when you're dealing with the topic of racism, and of course it's anti-racism. It's this critical theory that seems to be in all of these education institutions, and it's sad, but I think a lot of our kids have been taught it one way or another in grade school, but our universities are filled with it as well. So I would imagine that somebody recalls that their recent graduates, hearing about this in school, if it didn't radicalize them at that point. What they're seeing and hearing in the culture through the media is certainly going to they're going to relate to that, or at least relate to it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were elements of critical race theory. I went to a nice little Catholic school growing up, but we had some secular textbooks, some history books and things like that. And there were definitely even some quote-unquote politically correct talking points in those books. And I had good teachers and things, so I wasn't propagandized or taken in by it. And also, of course, I had excellent parents who would teach me the truth. But, yeah, this has been around for a really long time, and now it's just has some updated terminology, but the goals are all the same. They always have been. I think they're kind of going to maybe be their own undoing, the woke puppet masters, masterminds, as I call them, because they've accelerated and taken off the gloves, and they're moving so quickly and so fast. Before they could sneak in a few things here and there, and people would kind of, maybe put up a little bit of a fuss, but accept it because, it's not that bad. But whenever they see drag queens reading to little kids at story hour, and some of the curricula that's being exposed, and as parents saw what was actually being taught whenever their kids were staying home during COVID, I think the silver lining of all this is the more extreme and crazy and radical the woke get, and the more that they express what their true beliefs and goals are, the more people will push back. And I think we've seen that a little bit with the Bud Light controversy and Target and those sorts of things. People are realizing what this is actually all about.
Yeah, and it all seems very, very tied, again, through the media, but in all of these institutions. It's coming from all directions, and you really don't have to give it a lot of thought to see it, that it's all tied together in many different ways.
Right, and I think people can feel like they're the only one, and I've felt that way from time to time, and writing this book really made me realize that we are truly the silenced majority. There are more of us than there are of them, but it can seem overwhelming, and like we've already lost the culture war because so many of these institutions are so powerful. You look at Amazon, you look at Target, they're so wealthy, they're well-funded, and they're loud. Twitter, Facebook, things like that, they have such a big platform. You can feel very alone. But whenever things like the Dylan Mulvaney happened, the campaign there, and you saw the swift and very determined backlash and the boycotts, you realize, oh no, we're not alone. They control things. They're the ones who are canceling. They're the ones who are censoring. They have a lot of power, but we're not going to put up with it anymore. I think people are realizing, and they're standing up, and they're frustrated, and they're going to push back.
It's wonderful to see. Actually, that was again, the Bud Light story was so profound. I don't know how many. Are they still on a decline? By the way,
yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's they deserve it. I mean, they really picked a really poor fight. You go after one of the most popular beers that are out there, and you do this, and you don't think that you've got a bunch of common people that don't want to be associated with something like that. They're not going to buy it anymore. Or if you picture yourself, you're at a bar and you're having a beer, the last thing you want to do is hold a Bud Light can because if you're a guy, I mean, you just don't want to do that.
And as you point out, Teresa, people are starting to push back. It's great to see that. In many cases, it takes a lawsuit to do that. We've seen, some schools. I think there was a school system or a school that was just they settled on like $100,000 settlement because a fourth grade girl had been encouraged at school to kind of be identified as a male and take a boy's name and so forth. And then when mom finds out, because of course they keep it from the parents, she files a suit and wins. So it's great to see people that are starting to push back on this. And I think for the most part, we tend to be real tolerant people, and we don't really let a lot of things get to us, which means we're not very confrontational, and sometimes we need to be confrontational.
Right. I think that's part of why we got to the point where we are, that we have to have these lawsuits, and that wokeness has spread so far and wide and taken such a hold, is because the people who are not of the woke crowd, traditional-minded, just wholesome, regular, I call them normal Americans, tend to just want to live their lives, have a fulfilling job, provide for their families, hang out with each other on the weekends, have a cookout. We don't want to be bothered about diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas, or we just want to live our lives. And whenever stuff like this pops up and they try to force it on us, we're just kind of like, oh, just ignore it and it'll go away. Or this person feels so radically about some sort of social cause. We're like, oh, okay, you can feel that way. You can have your protest, or you can put up your signs, or whatever it is, and we're just going to keep living our lives. And it wasn't until this new form of liberalism that I think people are really having it forced upon them. It used to be kind of go along to get along, kind of a libertarian attitude, like you can do it, just don't bother me about it. But now they are bothering us about it, and they're bothering our children, and they're making us fund it. Where so many of our tax dollars, if you live somewhere, especially if you live somewhere really liberal, are going to so many of these causes. Now people are waking up. They're like, enough is enough. You had your time where you kind of did this without involving the rest of us if we didn't want to be involved, but now they're forcing us to be involved, so people are letting them know how we really feel.
Yeah, and you talk in your book about toxic empathy, and we kind of touched on that a little bit there, but we're going to take a little break here now. We're going to come back and maybe dig more into that and other parts of Woke Proof Your Life. Teresa Mull, our guest on Faith with Reasons. We're going to take this short break. Teresa, if you can hang on, we'll be right back right after the break. You're listening to Faith with Reasons. Shayne Stanfield and Ron Finn here on Annunciation Radio.
God calls everyone to a life of holiness and to proclaim the faith and word, as well as witness.
To help discern your role in the conversion of the world, go to streetevangelization.com. There, St. Paul Street Evangelization will show you how to share your faith in a non-confrontational way.
streetevangelization.com. If God does call, answer.
Experience the incredible story of a woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica, grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Canton, Ohio during the Great Depression. Rita's father abandoned the family before she was 5 years old. Her early years of trial were compounded by a debilitating illness until she was healed by Jesus through a woman named Rhoda Wise. That healing set her life on a course that would ultimately change the world. Learn the amazing story of Rita Rizzo at the Mother Angelica Museum in her hometown of Canton, Ohio. Go to www.motherangelicamuseum.com. Be inspired. Plan your visit now at motherangelicamuseum.com.
Father Mateo once said, "Make your home another Bethany. Our homes are meant to be holy. Where life is lived, so does our faith need to be lived out as well. When we take time to develop a devotion to His heart, we can experience new graces for daily living, even when life is difficult. The Sacred Heart Enthronement is a powerful way to experience Christ's love. Visit welcomehisheart.com to learn more about the Sacred Heart Enthronement.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Hey, welcome back here. Shayne Stanfield with Ron Finn, and today we're blessed to have Teresa Mull, author of Woke Proof Your Life. It's a handbook on escaping modern political madness and shielding yourself and your family by living a more self-sufficient, fulfilling life. Teresa was blessed to grow up in her ancestral home in the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania. She received a degree in comparative literature from the University of Dallas and interned for Laura Ingraham and at the American Spectator magazine in Washington, D.C. Her writings have appeared in New York Times, Baltimore Sun, Miami Herald, New York Post, Fairfax Daily News Miner, American Conservative, and many other publications. She's currently an assistant editor at Spectator World, a policy advisor for education at the Heartland Institute, and a part-time editor of the Phillipsburg Journal. And the first half, we were discussing generally wokeness and how it's proliferated. I can't even say it.
Proliferated?
Yeah, that too.
I don't know.
It's all over everywhere, and we really need to get going on this book. It's got a lot here. It's a fantastic what Ron described as a handbook to help protect us from this wokeism. And you mentioned, Ron, previously this toxic empathy. I think we should probably define what that is and how you propose that we avoid that.
Yes, absolutely. Toxic empathy is a term I came upon when I was researching this book. An author, I believe he's a psychiatrist, termed it. And it's basically whenever you see somebody doing something that's harmful, but you're afraid that if you speak up that person won't like you, so you don't say anything. You know, maybe somebody is drinking too much, or they're eating unhealthily, or they're spending their money unwisely, or they're in a relationship that's not good for them, and you're so afraid of them not approving of you anymore or inviting you to their party or whatever it is that you don't say anything. You might even celebrate what they're doing because you want to be liked. And I think that is sort of the reason that wokeness has been allowed to proliferate, because as we talked in the last half hour, so many people who are opposed to wokeness are kind-hearted, and they want people to be able to express their beliefs and to speak their minds, even if it's something they disagree with. It's the woke who are doing the canceling. It's the woke who are bullying and calling names whenever you disagree with them. But the people on the other side, the traditional-minded Christians, are let people speak their minds and let people live their lives. And I think that's gotten us to where we are. We can't be afraid to speak up. We can't be afraid of being censured and being canceled and being called names because, Christ had a to him. But it's obviously a natural a human instinct to want to be liked and to fit in and to belong. But it's not the most important thing, and we need to keep that in mind whenever we're fighting wokeness.
Amen. Because really, to be accused of being intolerant when you're the most, when you're very tolerant.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, you're accused by the most intolerant people, out there. It's not enough to have empathy and let them, to even take a live and let live attitude. You have to not only agree with them, but you have to champion what they're doing, and you have to become a supporter. You're with us or you're against us. Is the whole feeling, this is where the bullying comes in, really.
Yeah, and if you're not that way, you get canceled.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I talked to a guy in the book, too. He's a model, a very successful model, and he was canceled. He went to an event at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump was there, and he took a picture while he was there, and he wanted to post it to his social media, but he paused and he thought, I don't know, a lot of my followers, a lot of the people in the modeling industry are very progressive and woke. Maybe I shouldn't do this, but he was so excited about it, and he thought it was such a neat opportunity that he wanted to share it, and he did, and lo and behold, he lost like 20,000 followers. He got some hate messages. He was labeled a bigot, a homophobe, a racist, all these things. And he talks in the book about how he knew these people who were calling him these things, and he says, they knew I wasn't a bigot or a homophobe or a racist or any of those things, but they had to say it. They had to speak out because, again, on social media, it's like a tree that falls in the wood. If you don't express it on social media, do you really think did it really matter? Are you really woke? So he experienced tremendous backlash. He lost some modeling gigs over it. He lost some partnership deals and things that he was getting, for his career through social media. And he certainly suffered, but he said that the reward that he has reaped through speaking out, the number of friends who have come forward and supported him, he's kind of has a whole different life now, a whole new view of life. It's like a weight was lifted from him. He could finally speak his mind, and he feels freed and honest, and he's just happier in his soul, and he has a whole new community of people. So it might be painful for a while, for a little bit, and difficult and uncomfortable, but certainly you will be rewarded for speaking the truth always.
That's wonderful. Now, you mentioned toward the end of the last half hour this word normal, and it's such a basic word, but I think it says it all. People just want to be normal, and you this is a big part of your book, and you've got 7 ways to be truly normal, and why don't you take us through those?
Certainly, yes. The word normal really strikes a chord with me because, you look out into this world of chaos, and I think I was arguing why, a biological male should not be allowed to play on the women's team. And I just kind of stopped, and I was like, what happened to our world? How do we get to this point that I have to waste my breath saying these things, right? Debating this? So I thought, can we just get back to being normal, and it's almost like a foreign concept in this chaotic, crazy, mad world. So I encourage people to think about what normal is. If you think of going to the doctor and you have a normal temperature, normal is what is good and healthy. So what is good and healthy for society? And the advice I give people is, first and foremost, to seek ye first the kingdom of God, of course. A little life hack I stole from Scripture. I think a reason we've gotten so woke in our society is because we have lost our communal faith in God and in our Judeo-Christian faith that founded this country and made it so wonderful. The farther we get away from those traditions and values, the more miserable we become, the more wokeness is able to infiltrate people's minds and hearts and souls and kind of take over. So we definitely need to put God back into the picture. If you are a believer, then you need to be proclaimed boldly from the housetops more than ever. Don't hide your belief and your faith under a bushel basket. Again, from the Bible, we are to be the light of the world. Oh, yeah. So don't be afraid. Speak out. If you feel a little hesitant, pray to the Holy Spirit. Ask Him for guidance on how to talk to people you encounter who are woke. Ask Him to give you the words, and just be a person of faith and be bold. And I also have some guides for people, because this book, I wrote it with lots of people in mind, not just people who are already traditional-minded Christians, but for anybody who's kind of looking at our modern society and they're disenchanted by it and upset by it. Even people who are Democrats aren't necessarily woke. They see the madness. I think it's just a very extreme sect of the population who's pushing this stuff and embracing it. So if you're not a person of faith, I encourage you to give it a shot. What do you have to lose? Our society, what it's offering you is just going to lead to more misery, and we're seeing that as our anxiety and depression rates of suicide just skyrocket. It's really heartbreaking, but that's what you get whenever you take God out of the picture. So I also have some recommendations for how you can go about seeking Christ, joining a church community, just try praying, it's not difficult. You have nothing to lose. You might as well, because like I said, wokeness is not giving us very, very good results or answers. So first and foremost, to find faith. And I also like to put in some stats and figures and things like that for kind of people who are a little skeptical, but who believe science more than they do maybe the Bible for now. So there's some statistics in there about how people of faith are happier, healthier, and more optimistic, and how communities that have very strong faith and are very more actively religious are just, these communities thrive because they value service to one another, and it's just a better place to live. So that's my first piece of advice. Secondly, education, not just for your children. Certainly, that's obviously very, very important, but also for yourself. Not everybody was blessed to have a traditional or a classical education. So I have wonderful resources in there that help people to kind of re-educate themselves as an adult, so that you can be armed with truth and wisdom from the greatest thinkers over the last, how many centuries, who have kind of wrestled with the problems that wokeness is bringing about in our world. As I said, nothing about wokeness is new. So these problems have kind of already been solved by philosophers and saints, and certainly in Scripture. We encounter all the elements of wokeness and then some. So educate yourself, and if you're lucky enough to have kids, I have resources in there for how to go about homeschooling them. I talk to many parents who have homeschooled, who have started their own schools, who send their children to charter schools, and I also have a parent in there who sends her child to a public school in Seattle, of all places, very woke. But she assures us that you can raise a woke-proof child even in somewhere that is surrounded by wokeness, and she offers advice on how to do that. If you see yourself as the primary educator and you're constantly infusing your child with truth and teaching them how to, what's wrong with wokeness and why, that your child can come out unscathed from wokeness. So those are a couple.
That's awesome. And so needed. These are great practical things that people can do and take away from this book. Woke Proof Your Life is the name of the book. Teresa Mull is the author, and she is joining us here on Faith with Reasons. You also talk about some major woke weapons and how to disarm them in the book, and I can't wait to hear more about that.
Absolutely, yes. I go through some of the biggest. Some of them are also kind of sneakier than others. And we talked about climate change earlier, but a lot of people reject transgenderism and some of the more extreme, quote unquote, obvious woke weapons because they're so radical and so in your face. But I talk about climate change right at the beginning because this is something that I see people from both sides of the political aisle being taken in by, and it's a pretty innocent sounding agenda item. Of course we want to save the planet. Of course we don't want people to suffer. We don't want to see the penguins die and all these sorts of things. But then again, whenever you pull back the curtain and see how the climate change agenda affects people and how it's brought about, it really tells you everything you need to know about the woke movement and how they operate and what their agenda is, because with climate change, it's all about making the rest of us, the little guys, the silenced majority, comply with what the powerful woke puppet masters want us to do. And it costs them nothing, and all it does is gives them gain. They're going to make us get rid of our gas stoves. They're going to make us get rid of our fossil fuel powered vehicles. They're going to make us do all of these things. But meanwhile, you look at the people who are the loudest proponents of these things, people like Al Gore, for instance. He doesn't change his lifestyle at all. He makes zero sacrifices. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Leonardo DiCaprio. He's still jetting around the world, and he's proclaiming that the environment is about ready to be done with because we won't stop polluting. Or they say all these mm-hmm. things, and then they don't follow through. They're the biggest hypocrites. And meanwhile, they're raking in tons of money. They're living these lavish lifestyles. I'm like, if you really, truly believed, as President Biden has said, that climate change is the number one biggest threat to humanity, even worse than nuclear weapons,
it'll be our next emergency.
You would do something. You
Yeah.
would do everything. You'd be running around like, I don't want to give them any ideas or something, but like stabbing people's tires or something, you know, but they're not. They're just like, oh, you know, climate change is awful. I'm going to, you know, put out a flag that says that I love Mother Earth or something, and then go about my life and not do anything. Like, it's just crazy, and it really exposes them for who they are, which is just self-centered people who want the rest of us to suffer so that they can have their earthly gain in the here and now. And
we can always pay a guilt tax, you know.
Exactly. Yes.
Which, you don't give them any ideas.
Yeah. Again.
So this is a big one. I mean, the climate change thing is huge. How do I disarm that? Do I just ignore it? I mean, do I? I mean, these are weapons that you're helping us disarm. So how do I go about dealing with climate change?
Yeah. Well, inform yourself. So I have, I talk to a lot of experts, people who are smarter and more experienced and more virtuous than I am in the book. And I talked with this expert. His name is Steve Malloy, and I have tons of really great information from him, just really breaking down why climate change, I think he calls it like the biggest scam that has ever been peddled in the world.
I've heard that a lot,
Yes, yeah. So he breaks down point by point with examples and facts exactly why that is, and so that people can be informed. So the first thing I would say to do is to tell everybody you know and love and care about why this is, so that they're not taken in, because, again, both sides have been told this narrative for a really long time. You know, that's another one of those woke talking points that has been around for forever. You know, we're always saving the earth. The earth, it seems like it's always on the brink of of disaster. So inform yourself and inform others as much as you can. And obviously vote for people who are like-minded and who are alert to why the climate change agenda is so bad and evil. Be outspoken about it. Whenever you see companies that are promoting climate change policies, avoid them. I have a whole section also in there on conscientious consuming, so ways that people can vote with their pocketbooks, so to speak.
Yep.
So those are some of the biggest ways. And whenever there's legislation up for voting and debate, I would encourage people to speak out, to call their congresspeople, to write letters to the editors, things like that. Just don't be silent. Don't do the toxic empathy thing where you just sit by and say, "Oh, well, I can't do anything." You know, there's real strength with an outspoken populace. So just it can be tiring. You know, at the end of the day, you just kind of want to go back to your home and relax and just ignore the world and all the wokeness, but we really need to be loud about it and not let them take away our rights and cause us to suffer whenever the only reason for doing so is so that they can prosper.
So if you join something like a trap shooting league, for example, I mean, you get a little bit of an escape there, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And that's another key element of woke-proofing your life. I encourage people to volunteer and to get back to joining clubs and organizations and having hobbies and things, because wokeness, it depends on people who are fearful. And it again goes back to how wokeness really started to thrive during COVID, whenever a lot of us were afraid. You know, you think of the way that wokeness is successful, it makes you afraid of being canceled or of being censored. It makes you afraid of being called a homophobe or to appear that you might be a bigot or something like that. So whenever you take fear out of the picture, you're much less susceptible to being controlled by the woke powers. So if you're not listening to them and they're not threatening you, and you're not on your screen having the fear mongers agitate your spirit and your soul, and you're out there actually interacting with your friends and family and community members and contributing positively to society, wokeness has a lot lower chance of having success.
And this is how we really get the silent majority, because this fear, I can see this in many people. They don't want to be canceled. They don't want to be called a bigot. They don't want to be called a racist, a climate denier. All of these things, people, if they live a life in fear, this is going to propagate quite a bit.
Exactly. And again, if we go back to how much time the average person spends on his phone, and then you look at what is on the phone, it would make you feel like you're the only one who thinks the way that you do, because they do cancel you if you say something the opposite. And it is hard to find an alternative opinion. If you search for climate change is not real, I don't know if you'll get any of results on Google, or you're looking for some sort of alternative perspective. You're not really going to find it. But if you put your phone down and you go to the Trap Club, your sportsman's club, or you go to the Knights of Columbus breakfast, you're going to find tons of people who agree with you and support you and will help you become a more virtuous, non-woke person. So it's very important that we actually spend time with one another in real life and not just rely on our phones for all of our social interactions.
Yeah, and even just our own thoughts and what permeates all around us. We tend to get immersed in things and then can't seem to shake it. And in your book, you do bring out some tenets to focus on when you kind of feel trapped in that woke culture maze. So describe that a little bit for us in the book.
I encourage people to reevaluate their use of technology. Are you using it as a resource or a recourse? We've all been there, and I've certainly done this. You have like 5 minutes to spare in a waiting room, and you whip out your phone, and you just start scrolling, or you just start reading the news. And this is time that we used to spend praying or thinking, philosophizing, maybe chatting with the person next to us, just kind of a time of reflection, and we don't really have that these days. So I encourage people to make sure that they're using their technology so that it's beneficial to them, and it's more of a tool than as like a time filler. So that's the first thing that I would do, and I find that anytime I get to go somewhere that I lose cell phone service, it's kind of like I feel relieved, like a weight has been lifted from me. And I refer to this in the book as unforced stress. If anybody is familiar with tennis, there's unforced errors where your opponent doesn't do anything tricky, you just mess up on your own. So we have all this unforced stress that we're bringing into our lives by consuming so much media on our phones and televisions. So we can cancel them before they cancel us.
Yeah.
So
Great
turn
point.
off your phone.
Yeah, great point.
Manage your social media usage. Don't invite that fear and stress and division into your life. And then whenever you do that, you're going to have so much more free time to spend on really life-giving and things that help you become, I say, kind of like become more human. You're going to use your senses more. Your eyes are going to be lifted up to the beautiful leaves on the trees and the birds that are flitting around, and you're going to listen to their song, and you're just going to appreciate life more. And it'll give you time and opportunity to make new friends, to learn a new skill. I think that if everybody in America had a garden, that wokeness and pretty much all of our problems would kind of go away because it's so therapeutic to be outside in nature. That's something I definitely advise people whenever they start to feel depressed and overwhelmed by the evil that seems to be everywhere is just go take a walk outside. Leave your phone behind. Just take time to listen and commune with God through the beautiful creation that He's provided us, and give your mind a break. Kind of let it breathe and ground yourself. So, and also, developing a hobby, something, using your hands is shown to be very good for our mental health. Adding to our self-sufficiency is another way that we can avoid woke corporations if we learn to do and make a few things ourselves, maybe repurpose something, buy something from an antique store rather than buying it from some woke corporate conglomerate. Just remember that you have all these gifts and talents and all these amazing senses that God has gifted us with, and we need to be using them because it's really a disservice to allow wokeness to overcome us and overwhelm us and to distract us from nobler work and also just from the beauty that we've been given.
Very good, and I think this is such a common sense point when you think about how wokeness can infiltrate your life primarily through social media, through your device. Simply put it down, unplug it, go do something that isn't connected to it. Because, like you said, you can go out in the garden and who cares? You're not. It's not impacting you at that point. Quit reading the news. These are things where it seems that it can really infiltrate anybody's life. If you don't allow it in, then it's an easy tool to like you said, cancel it before it cancels you.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I had a friend during the COVID pandemic who told me, I think he went camping and he came back and everybody was freaking out and he didn't know why. And he said, if you didn't see it on your phone, you wouldn't know what was going on. And I found this so much, especially where I live in Pennsylvania, outside of the big woke cities, and there's not, wokeness isn't going on, really. You go out and you might see like a rainbow flag here and there, but people aren't fighting in the streets. You would think that America was just like this unhinged, nasty, terrible place, which it can be in certain places, and it seems that way on the TV and in social media in those places, but if you get out and you just interact with one another in real life and you're talking to your neighbors and caring about them and just living a Christian life, it can bring you a lot of peace and purpose. We just need to stop letting the wokeness distract us from that and destroy our inner harmony. I have some friends, and I've been found myself in this mindset as well, where they almost make fighting wokeness and progressivism kind of like a job, or like it kind of makes them feel excited or fulfilled whenever they're like, I don't know, battling internet trolls and things like that. But I encourage people also to make sure that you're not wasting your time on people and arguments that you're not going to change your mind. So sometimes you do have to shake, you have to shake the dust from your feet at some point.
Great
be mindful of that.
Yeah, because that if it takes over you, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, it's not a good thing. Well, this is a wonderful book, and I love the fact that it's a hopeful book. I mean, it's easy to find all the things that are taking place that we're being bombarded with, but you've actually taken it a step further and helped us to woke-proof our lives and take some positive action. I almost said affirmative action, to kind of battle that and insulate yourself from it. So thank you so much for the book. Again, it's called Woke Proof Your Life, a handbook on escaping modern political madness and shielding yourself and your family by living a more self-sufficient, fulfilling life. Teresa Mull, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you get the book at Sophia Institute or at Rieger's or your favorite Catholic bookstore.